Good afternoon, honorable members. Honorable members, when we suspended for the luncheon break, the honorable member for Angliston had reserved the floor. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Angliston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of the good people of Angliston. And I want to say to them today that I'm very grateful that they have allowed me to be their gatekeeper in this parliament and to be their voice on a number of issues that are of concern to them. As we find ourselves in the midst of this pandemic and the hardship, and I know tomorrow we're going to be doing a debate about, which is going to, I guess, involve a high degree of restrictions, which requires shutdowns, perhaps. We've seen it in the past, so we might see it in the future, we don't know. And while I think it's important for the government to understand that in principle, the Bahamian people support efforts to take us beyond this crisis of this pandemic. But for the people of Angliston, it's not enough just to implement restrictions, rules, effect arrests, when at the same time, people find themselves in very, very difficult circumstances where food is an issue, they can't pay their rent, and they're not working, and that agencies are slow to respond. So I'm saying you cannot have on the one hand this high ideal, but on the other hand, we're not balancing the well-being of our people in our effort to counter the effects of this pandemic and to move beyond it. On that issue, I know the food program has gone to a second phase, and I saw something in the papers today about this, what is the criteria. And I'm told the distribution place is now 601 on Bay, the former 601 on Bay Street. So you centralize food collection, which I don't know what's happening out there, but just my common sense tells me that you're creating bottlenecks, and it's going to be very difficult for people who are already facing difficult circumstances. In the first phase, I want to thank the organizers at that time because they allowed my constituency office to be used as a distribution point. And it was very convenient to constituents, people who live in the community. And my staff was able to have a hands-on understanding of what the issues were. And so I think that I want to say to the government that to look very carefully at what effect or impact your measures are having. And at the same time, if you're going to effect those measures, ensure that you put in place a protective environment for people and not just tell them, do your best in very difficult times. On the issue of rent assistance, the minister's here and I've spoken to him and I know he's addressed it, but we can't seem to get a result. There are so many people who have not been able to pay their rent, and they're being evicted, they're being taken to court, which is very stressful for many people who've never been to court before. And then they face the spectacle or the specter of homelessness. And I want to engage the government again. It's the same argument. You can't just bring the police and the defense force and the enforcement of laws without at the same time your agencies ensuring that we bring some level of amelioration to people who are most hard hit by these measures. Some people don't feel it, but he who feels it or she who feels it knows it. And really, in this country, the people who are feeling it are mostly women who are heading households with children and living in poverty. And so I want to urge the government to accelerate its response to assisting people with rent, who have rents due, and to also ensure that the criteria being applied for the food program is not so strict that you end up leaving out people who legitimately ought to benefit from some kind of assistance. We've been doing some stuff in Angleton, which I won't talk about now, but it's involved. The park renovations, demolishing. Speaking with the Southern District Growth Station about demolishing buildings. The Ministry of Works has been doing assisting very greatly in a number of matters that I brought to their attention. I'm very grateful for that. And there's a lot of clearing and garbage collection, etc. So, but I'll come back to that. We've been donating tablets to the schools. And I spoke to the Minister of Education. He's indicating that all primary schools are going to be covered. And so I will now shift my focus to C.H. Reeves at R.M. Bailey. We've made a donation already to E.P. Roberts Primary. I also want to use this opportunity to remember James Oswald Ingram, who was the Speaker of this House and also Deputy Governor General. And as has been previously said, we remember him fondly in this House for his management of this House, because he had what I would call a very gentle but firm management of these proceedings. And he was greatly respected by the members, and he was quite a gentleman. As a political colleague, he was always very respectful and interesting in that he is a real Eleuthera man. He was born there, he lived there, his business was there, he represented people there, and he was loved, regarded, respected in Eleuthera. He was old school in so many ways. And I want to extend condolences to his wife, who was always at his side, always. You know, Mr. Ingram was such a gentleman that we were in an environment, I'll put it like this, where it was a competing environment. And one of my competitors' agents was saying some things about me, and he overheard it. Now, he didn't support me in that environment, but he intervened and he said, stop that. Because he knew that you had to, you had to have a level of decorum and maintain a standard, and it never was that serious. And that was the nature of Mr. Ingram. He was a fine gentleman. And I want to also send condolences to his community, because he was loved and regarded as a patriarch in that community. The legislation that we are speaking of today is, I guess, part of the compendium of bills that we have seen in this parliament in response to the blacklisting and the EU and all these different OECD, etc. And it seems to deal specifically with the issue of tax avoidance, evasion, whatever you want to call it. And I looked at the objects and reasons, and it says this bill seeks to amend the penal code to provide for a new section, so as was pointed out, a new crime by any person who seeks to defraud the government of a foreign jurisdiction by any action or omission in the Bahamas. So this is a new offense, which is really a companion to the assisting third states in recouping or bringing some sort of remediation as it relates to their tax laws, etc. And this is well, I guess you can a form of what we call transnational crime. And we find that more and more with the OECD and the many laws we have changed in response to their demands. And we look at globalization and all of the things that come out of that. More and more things are shrinking. And we're now finding in the Bahamas, we are enforcing laws that really relate to third states and their domestic arrangements for taxes. And we are facilitating them through our amendment in the penal code. And I was thinking about this today, and this is really the premise of what I want to say. We don't object to this, and we support it. But we would like to see in governance not simply a facilitation of the mandates of third parties, but the establishment of indigenous standards for our own people. I looked at some of the laws this administration has passed, which I believe do not set that protective standard. For example, the issue, the Commercial Enterprises Act. incentivizing foreign labor in this country, violating, in my view, the tenets of Bahamianization. This is where we are externalizing. It's like the opposite. This bill is to protect. This bill is the effect of some state saying, "Listen, we need this to protect our interests." But what we do, we pass laws in this parliament which do not have the effect of protecting our own interests. And I have a grave difficulty with that because I think it has a lot to do with how we see ourselves. The member for Yamacross spoke today about the issue of citizenship. I was hoping that he would say definitively, but maybe that's not the position of the government, that they would absolutely not bring or seek to give a green light to economic citizenship in this country. I know that when we were the government, the Honorable former Prime Minister Perry Gladstone Christie, Right Honorable, asserted that in this parliament as a tenet of our administration, we would not support giving citizenship for economic reasons. I posted about this on social media, and I said in there, and I want to assert in this parliament speaker, I will fight that to the death in this parliament. I will fight that to the death. You're giving away our labor. Now we don't have a definitive position on our citizenship. And you look at the countries that are doing that, the little countries, them little countries and the funny situations, we shouldn't even be having that conversation. But this is what you look at, even the permanent residents, the policy related to permanent residents. It precedes this administration and preceded the one before. But I remember sitting in cabinet one time and the then Prime Minister asked a question, which I think is a very good question. How many people have permanent residence in this country? Economic permanent residence. Do we know? You buy a piece of land, you get permanent residence. At some point, we're a small population. At some point, we have to understand what are we agreeing to and agreeing to and agreeing to. And what is this policy that we have? Will we use our land to incentivize, I don't know, you're getting stamp duty out of it or VAT? That's what you're getting. You're selling the land, you're alienating it to foreigners, and you're getting VAT? That is an investment policy that makes sense? I think this is the time, as we see other states aggressively pursuing their interests, like the Europeans, we got to do the same thing in our country. We have to look at the concessions that we give to foreign investors. We find ourselves giving prioritization and taxes to the most wealthy, whereas those at the bottom get they get the heat of taxation in this country. These countries that are putting pressure on us, they don't do that, They don't do that. They don't do that, and they're pursuing their interests in this country. But we don't pursue our own interests in our own country. But we pursuing their interests. Something is wrong with that picture, Mr. Speaker. That is why you find that more and more people on this issue of natural resources, I don't know the facts as I probably should know, and maybe when the debate begins, because the member has indicated that we're going to lay some legislation on the matter, which will bring a debate, hopefully. But you are finding, regardless of what the facts are or are not, more and more people are taking a sense that, listen, we have had enough of this. When is it that we are going to get justice as a people? This is what governance is about. Governance is supposed to be pursuing justice for the people. But are we doing that? In this bill, we're pursuing justice for a third state. No problem. But what about justice for the Bahamian people? I looked at this issue of transnational legislation and crime, etc. And then I thought about the transnational deals. And then you look at Prince George Dock. And as many in this parliament will know, Mr. Speaker, I never supported that. And we were told it was like NAD. It's nothing like NAD. Absolutely nothing like NAD. That was not true. Not true. We've actually leased the dock to a Turkish company, which has some Bahamian affiliates or whatever. I'm also told that in the construction, and I don't know if it's correct, that in the construction, a Turkish company has been, or it's being signaled to do the construction. So here we are now, transnational deals, transnational deals. Transnational deals. And so, Mr. Speaker, more and more Bahamians are having a growing awareness about what it is that we want for ourselves. You're not going to escape it. I don't want no legislator to think you will ever escape that again. Bahamians have reached the end of the line with that. And so you have to, this is now forcing politicians and legislators to begin to look at our national well-being in a way very different than we've seen with this administration, and perhaps as aggressively as we should have in prior administrations. Bahamians are not satisfied with being treated like second-class citizens. And you know what's ironic? It's these same European Union individuals, states, that have told us we can't tax the Bahamian people and give breaks to the foreigners. But that's what we're doing. Think about it. We're taxing ourselves and giving breaks. They said, no, you can't do that. You have to balance the playing field. They're interested because you're incentivizing tax avoidance or whatever word you want to use. But on a philosophical level, what you're doing really is having two standards. And that's really what my argument is today. Because, you know, the member for Cat Island, Rumkey in San Salvador, he raised some issues. And we've heard how that has played out. But I think that I will just say it like this. I recall the member for Kalani taking multiple positions on allegations against members in this house. In fact, I remember when there was an allegation against the then Michael member, the opposition led by the Kalani wouldn't let the man speak. Every time he got up to speak, they banged on the table every time for days and for weeks. They wouldn't let the man speak. But now, all of a sudden now, we got some view of how these things go. My position is very simple, Mr. Speaker. We have standards and values in our nation and in this parliament. And the question is, how will we allow for distraction of good governance in this country? For what? I mean, you know, not to remind the member, but he fired 3 or 4 people in here because they voted against VAT. One was from Bain and Grantstown. You could imagine him going to Bain and Grantstown and say, I agreed with more taxes on you. You ain't working, you catching hell. And I agreed in here. He voted his conscience. Member for Pine Ridge, member for Centerville, and Golden Isles. That was the end of them. Swift. No, swift. That was what you call swift justice. But then, of course, now you look at more serious issues, and we don't know what's going on. Yeah, we don't know what's going on. So, Bahamians are watching, and I don't want them to conclude that our leaders are hypocrites. I pray they do not conclude that. I pray they'll uphold the standard. My whole presentation, as the speaker, is about the standard. The standard. We cannot say we have a higher standard for third parties than we do for ourselves. I mean, we could say that, but that'd be I think we've already been saying it in many respects, but it's a sad message to the Bahamian people because they're not into that. So, Mr. Speaker, the question is, what are the standards and what are the values? What is it that, you see, I always say, you know, when every member in this house has a conversation with the Bahamian people about how they conduct themselves. Sometimes it requires very difficult decisions, very difficult. But it's not about you. It ain't about you. It's about the standard for our people. This is how we progress and advance. You know, and sometimes it involves sacrifice. Sometimes it involves loss. But you can't lose because if you upholding a standard, you cannot lose. You cannot lose if you uphold the standard. But if you do not uphold the standard, we all lose, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, before I take my seat, I wanted to say that we do support the legislation and to admonish that the time has come that we should not find ourselves continuously advancing the cause of third parties and begin to bring legislation that brings justice to the Bahamian people in this parliament. On the issue of, Mr. Speaker, the post-Dorian effort, I see the member for Central and Grand Bahama, Central Grand Bahama. I got a complaint, and I got to tell you, it came from one of your top generals. But he said, call my name, but I ain't gonna call his name, okay? But he is saying that absolutely nothing is happening in the recovery post-Dorian. Do you know of anything happening? Huh? I don't know who lives in Grand Bahama. Nothing is happening. And he's indicating also that people who are supposed to be paid are not being paid. And I just want to say this, right? We keep hearing about Dorian. It's the reason, Dorian and now the pandemic. No problem, these are real things. But you can't keep using them as an excuse, while at not the same time bringing an aggressive response. Because anyone who was around or who has watched, and some were there, the issues of Dorian, will know that this was the most brutal, psychologically damaging, painful time we have probably ever seen in terms of, in a global way. A lot of people died. A lot of people fought for their lives. And now, here we are, going for 2 years later, still fighting, still seeing the remnants every day. Every day. I'm calling on the government, if only for the sake of mercy to those people, please effect aggressively a response to do away with the matters that are outstanding in these places. And like I say, this came from one of your top generals, one of your big generals, okay? He's fed up, and it's not right. And he's saying, you're not even communicating what the plan is. It's just a non-response. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that as indicated, we support this legislation. It is dealing with extraterritorial crime. And before I sit down, while we're talking about extraterritorial crime, when I spoke in this parliament last week, Mr. Speaker, I noted that the Bahamas has one of the highest rates per capita of the use of guns in crime and violence in the world, and in the top in the region, and one of the highest in the world. And I want to invite, as part of our extraterritorial trust, particularly the Minister of Foreign Affairs this year, that we begin to aggressively engage production states that are responsible for the smuggling of these weapons to work more effectively. You can't tell me about OPBAT because you don't want drugs coming to your country. But you can't tell me you want to work with me equally as committed and as committed a manner for the thing that's destroying my country. It ain't all about you. And so I want to invite the government. I've spoken about this before, and I think there've been some little sparks. But just as the OECD aggressively pursue their interests, that we pursue our interests as a people. We're strategically located, our airspace, our maritime areas. We should be able to leverage. We got ORTEC there in Andros. We should be able to leverage more effective response for ourselves. So I end by just saying this, and this is my point really, that what we do should not just be about justice to third states, but we should do justice to ourselves. That means you can't bring no law in here that says you're going to incentivize foreign labor when Bahamians are out of work. That means you can't have no conversation about giving away citizenship or selling your passport because you want to get a couple dollars. We got to build who we are. We have to build and continue to build and to build value, not give away value. This is the time now to build value as a people. And so, Mr. Speaker, we support the legislation. Having said that, but I want to declare on this the season of building value for the Bahamian people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
I couldn't get this on.
Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for North Abaco. On a point of order.
I just want to respond to, if I can, to what the member said about engaging foreign partners as relates to weapons. I think I owe her an explanation.
Thank you.
And the
Chair
country.
recognizes the Honorable Member for North.
I just wanted to say to Angliston that on every occasion, when we meet as CARICOM as a caucus, we raise this issue of guns, creating violence in the region, and we receive undertakings of special efforts to help. Every federal agency in the United States works very closely with local enforcement in the Bahamas and in the region to mitigate and stem the flow. But it's a particularly naughty problem that we're working on and trying to find ways and means of stopping it. You can imagine if you have all of these transport, sea and air, coming into the country, how difficult the task is. But it's one that we do not take lightly. We say to the Americans and to the region, the Bahamas is referred to as the third border. We are the gatekeepers in the Bahamas. If the Caribbean is referred to as the third border, we are the gatekeepers. And so we see ourselves important in that strategic, geopolitical, and geostrategic position. Thank you.
Greatly. Can I just say that I understand the borders, the archipelago. We have 29 airports, so I understand that. But every time there's a drug interdiction of marijuana, which you're talking about legalizing in many respects or phases of it, you have intelligence, you have full arsenal for interdictions. All I'm saying is, just like how you could do that, let's do the same thing for guns in this country.
Honorable Member for Angliston, while you're on your feet, I have a question for you. I just want to make sure it wasn't a Freudian slip that I heard. Did you indicate that the organization responsible for food distribution use your community center as a distribution outlet?
Not the listing, the distribution came from the head body, but they were allowed to come there and their names and collect it.
And collect
Yes,
food distribution from your community center.
The ones whose names were there, and it worked very smoothly.
Thank you. That's what I thought I heard. The chair recognizes. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Speaker, I note your question. Mr. Speaker, I note your question for clarification on the question of food distribution. And I wanted to use that as a clear indication that the intent of the government when forming the task force for the food distribution to not use the various constituency headquarters was real, because that very comment resulting in a question from you has also resulted in a question from a number of my own colleagues, because a number of my own colleagues continued to question why couldn't their constituency offices be used. No, I'm not attacking my parishioner. I'm making the point. No, I'm making the point. I'm making the point that the food distribution task force was allowed the independence and the autonomy to use whichever facility they thought. And so, before my colleagues ask the question of me, I want them to be aware that whatever decisions were made independently of the Independent Food Distribution Task Force. Now, your information here, I'm sure, will result in some other internal discussions. But as it is at this point, the Food Distribution Task Force, which is independent, acted independently. And you proved that for me, and I thank you very much.
Just firstly, I had no dealings with it. I never gave out a bag of food in my life. In that, I don't know who they chose, who they didn't choose. I had absolutely no dealing with it. Just a physical location for them to collect. So my office had nothing to do with it per se. Okay, but I don't know. I mean, you're in charge, you know. You're in charge, you know. You didn't realize that, eh? Yeah, I call on you now to be in charge, you know. That's what I'm telling you. Be in charge. Don't sit there. Be in charge. Don't just sit there and let that play out in the country's public domain. Be in charge. The other point I want to say, Speaker. No. I don't know the Prime Minister will ask a question like that. Speaker, no, I'm not. I thought the objective is to get food to the people. If it's going through these independent agencies and you have nothing to do with it, what is the complaint? The other thing, Mr. Speaker, I want to say.
Happy that on the record.
I thought the Prime Minister was complaining. I don't know. No, not for me. You're not happy for me because I was not getting anything. It was people are getting it. Mr. Speaker, the other thing is that in any event, it's now a bottleneck on 601, and I think that is what they need to really look at now. The fact that everybody is being required to go to one location, and it's creating a serious discomfort for people.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
You know where they go to 601?
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Coming to me.
Whenever I have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I deliberately did not disrupt Angliston while she was making her presentation. But certain assertion was made that it's totally unfounded. She said that one of my generals, or the member said that one of my generals called her, the member of Central, I represent Central Grand Bahama. But I'm a minister for natural disaster preparedness and reconstruction. The message is that one of my generals called her, the member, and stated that nothing has happened in Grand Bahama since Hurricane Dorian. Now, nothing could be further from the truth. That is totally disingenuous. He has an eyes to seek and see work with respect to debris management, reconstruction, and any number of things happening. If someone would come here and said it to me about if Angliston was in my position, I would not even come to this honorable house and repeat that because that is totally unfounded. I just want to go on the record as saying that that should be totally dismissed because there's absolutely no truth to that. Anyone could go in Grand Bahama and Abaco and they can see that work, but the word was nothing has happened since Dorian, and that is totally untrue.
Member misrepresented what I said. First of all, I didn't say this was a general of Central Grand Bahama. I said I see Central Grand Bahama here because he's the minister responsible.
So one of your generals?
No, I didn't. It's one of your FNM generals. Well, he could be. He might be your general. I don't know, but he told me call his name. Don't push it because it can embarrass you all. Okay, Speaker. No, Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I finish, Mr. Speaker? And what he says, and he sent me a message. He said that everything is at a still stop. That's his words. No longer than yesterday, I called the office. They don't even know what's happening. They can't even tell you when you're going to get, I guess he mean paid, or how they're going to pay. You can't even reach carefully. You can't even reach the minister. Tell me you there. The people go to the hardware every single day. When they go, open, and the whole concept is they don't know what the hell is going on. Excuse the expression, Mr. Speaker. And the government comes on.
Honorable Member,
Yeah.
extending you some liberty, but
Right.
we delving into we delving into
Okay, I'm just saying that,
hearsay
what I'm saying is that the
evidence,
members shouldn't take it personally. I mean, it's either it's factually or not. That one of your generals, your meaning the Free National Movement, says that he brought to my attention. He says that now, if you're saying that that everything is moving now, then he's not speaking the truth. I hope he's listening, because he is saying you can't get paid, you can't get information, and nothing is happening. That's what he said. Now, if that's not true, then of course, you know, he would have to explain why he's misleading people in that way.
Honorable members, just for the record, particularly when we're going to be reading these WhatsApp messages or other messages into the record of Parliament, I would strongly urge that before you repeat any hearsay information from a third party, that you verify the facts, because I don't think we want to descend to the point where we keep making statements and referring to someone as saying it without you verifying the facts. And we put that on the House record as if it is facts. So for the future, unless you could produce some documented evidence, honorable members, unless you could produce some documented evidence, I will not be accepting hearsay evidence, particularly from these. It is hearsay. If you're making reference to another person, you can make your own, and give your own opinion, but there's no way for us to verify. There's no way for us to verify what is being presented. So we finished with that. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael.
Speaker, it only falls on
Honorable member for Carmichael has the floor. Honorable member for Yamakota. Honorable member for Carmichael has the floor.
Speaker, it only falls to me now to close this debate. And I do so in appreciating that we have a unanimous Parliament that is going to support this very important legislation. This legislation, Mr. Speaker, is not about bowing to any outside power. This is not about doing anything that simply because someone else wants us to do it. Engliston, I love you. Don't ever forget I love you. Yeah. Speaker, there have been multi-million dollar frauds emanating from our country, which have impacted other countries. One of the things that happens in the world now is because even though the world is so small, people use the electronic media to be able to defraud other countries. And then they come into what they think is a safe place. And so they may come into the Bahamas and feel that they're safe from the world. We all know of incidents. I'm not going to call any names. We all know persons. You know some of the things that have happened notoriously in our country. In fact, Bahamians who have done it, and non-Bahamians who have done it. This is not the time or place for me to point out individuals. Let it just be said now that if it happens, the Bahamas is a law-abiding country that's going to ensure, as a part of the community of nations, we are going to have a remedy for it. And the remedy involves prosecution in Bahamian courts and redress so that if there is anything that the person has gained or anything that's used in the course of criminal conduct, that will accrue to our country, not to any other country. This is a type of legislation that we need to consider because more of it will come. Because the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that someone could be in any family island now. They could be anywhere in the country now, anywhere. And they could go online, as we've seen, and they could make representations to agents of another government from our country. It is no longer good for us to say what we used to say in the past. And it is no longer the current extradition treaties. We're not going to be able to extradite these people. And so countries are trying to work together to ensure that they are not seen as places where criminals can reside and act with impunity. And none of us wants that in the Bahamas. We want a country that is a law-abiding country and is known for abiding by the law, applying the law. And so I'm very grateful and appreciative that all of us in this parliament today saw the utility of this legislation, saw how important it's going to be, saw what is the difference it's going to make, and how it's going to continue to keep the reputation of the Bahamas as one of that is a law-abiding jurisdiction. I don't need to say any more on this, Mr. Speaker. Carmichael, on behalf of the people of Carmichael, I so move.
David, here's the bill. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the penal code. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the penal code.
Further second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further second readings. Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the House resolves itself into a committee of the whole with the Deputy Speaker in the chair.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House with the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the whole House in the chair. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole with the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the whole House in the chair.
Your time. We'll slow the process down. So,
Committee of the Whole. Committee of the Whole. Chair recognizes the member for Bamboo Town.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the long title of a bill for an act to amend the penal code be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
Been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 and 3 be agreed.
Been moved, members seconded that clause 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 2 and 3 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The bill is agreed in its entirety. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the Speaker takes the chair.
Been moved and seconded that the Speaker now do take the chair. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposed will rise. Speaker will now take the chair.
I hope you give the Speaker the time.
Beg leave to report that the committee has gone through the bill, making no amendments yet.
Honorable members, the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the Committee of the Whole has gone through the bill, making no amendment thereto. Third reading and passing of bills. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move the third reading and passing of a bill for an act to amend the penal code.
Honorable members, it's been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and pass. A bill for an act to amend the penal code. As many as on favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a third time and pass.
Bill for an act to amend the penal code.
Order that the bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be the Penal Code Amendment Act 2020. For the third reading and passing of bill, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further third readings.
Consideration of Senate amendments, resolutions, member statements. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Mangrove Key, South and Central Andros.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, on behalf of the great people of Mangrove Key, South and Central Andros, I would begin my brief presentation by drawing attention to the scriptural reference that is based in 2 Samuel chapter 3, verse 38. And it says, "And the king said unto his servants, Know ye not that there is a prince and a great man fallen this day in Israel?" Mr. Speaker, indeed a prince has fallen in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas in the name of one James Oswald Ingram, former member of Parliament and also acting Governor General and also deputy to the Governor General. A Christian, a churchman, a pastor's pastor, a gentleman, well-mannered, and a community builder. We sat after I was elected for the first time in 2007 on the back row together, along with the Honorable Cynthia Mother Pratt, Leslie O'Miller. We shared our moments together. He commiserated over the days when he ran for the House the first 3 times, only to be beaten by a younger one Anthony Tony Miller. But he never lost that gusto to fight until he won in 2002. Recently called him Uncle Oz. And I would have met him back in the early 1990s during my broadcast career, when I met persons in the Eleuthera district such as Breon Leary, Harry, the late Charlie Strawn, Clifford, Romel Fishnolls, Barbara Thompson was our sales officer at that time, Dr. Philip Bethel and his staff and family, Gilbert Richards, Edmund Hall, the late Mr. Hall, and Mr. Henry Sands and his family in beautiful Roxanne. He served as an MP and also the 50th Speaker of this Honorable House of Assembly. I remember him well, and he and the member for North Abaco would have had a very raucous moment one afternoon when I was visiting here after I was thinking about having my sojourn to this honorable place one day. And I sat in the gallery and observed Ingram on Ingram. What a day. He was the first Black employee at Barclays Bank in Eleuthera. And I remember my late mentor in broadcasting, Honorable Kelsey, former Senator, the Honorable Kelsey Johnson, diplomat, Ed Bethel, Richard Johnson, and others talking about him so proudly. Whit Scavala, Tony Miller, proud of him. He built a resort in Tappan Bay. And we from the ZNS crew stayed there when we went to solicit commercials during those days in the 90s and early 2000s. The lady Vaughan Hall, Dora Dean Campbell, and also Angie Kemp and many others. Justice of the Peace, community builder, his wife Marie and his children and the other siblings, our thoughts and our prayers are with them today. So this afternoon, before I move quickly to the member statement, I would say to him, to his family, who will now listen. I would have had an accord with the speaker. The speaker said he would combine both. And I would simply say, there's an old hymn that we would have used in the Jumper Church. And I would therefore quote a little piece this afternoon to my good friend, Uncle Oz, who's looking for the portals of glory. Well done, my child, my Lord will say. With courage bold, you stood for the right. A crown of life you've won. Well done, my child, he'll say that day. Like Paul of old, you fought a good fight. Well done, my child, Uncle Oz. Well done. A prince. A prince has fallen. And may his soul rest in peace and rise in glory. Mr. Speaker, in my final 40 seconds, I'll simply say, for the people of my community this afternoon, I was glad to have a brief communion with the member for South Beach. There's been much concern about bus contracts and the revocation or the renewal thereto, but it's an RFP process where persons can tender. And I want to lay those fares this afternoon as they're listening in the South Angeles community where I plan to be on Friday. Like I asked the member for Garden Hills, there's some need now to quiet some of the conversation about the 52-week program and the confirmation process. I want to say thanks to him. To the Mangrove Key Clinic, the member for Bamboo Town, we still owe a visit to Mangrove Key. Many are concerned during this pandemic about the clinic in Mangrove Key. And I'm grateful to the member for Carmichael, who has promised in the not too distant future, we'll have our gymnasium and the works once again recommencing. Over the road works in South and Central Andros, we're looking at those moving on pretty shortly. And I must note the fact that I know many are concerned about it. Roads are bad in Central Andros, from Andros Town to Coakley Bight, and the same from Drake Sillamars in South Andros. And I'm glad that we would have had a chance to commune about it very briefly. And we look forward to a better time for this Christmas. Hopefully we can get some small assistance as I go to Andros on Friday with a heavy heart. But we can hopefully clear those bridges, those graveyards, those parks can be fixed, and can be painted and get rims and basically can be in place. So that the same way the people in Golden Gates, and Garden Hills, and Kalani, and Yamacraw, and Seabreeze, and Angliston, and Freetown could have much to do and sing Merry Christmas and have a great time. That we could have a little bit of that same glee in some part of Andros, especially Mangrove Key, South, Central Andros. Mr. Speaker, through you, sir, hope that the powers that be would allow a little bit of that jingle bell to be felt in South Andros during these very tough and trying times during the Yuletide season. Thank you very much for this opportunity, sir.
Thank you very much, John. Honorable member, the chair recognizes.
Provide an extra 40 seconds to my honorable brother and member for South and Central Andrews. Mr. Speaker, I say to the people of South Beach, my deep gratitude for participating in the flu shot experience this past Friday. We obviously would have expected a greater number to have availed themselves of it. The Honorable Member for Kalani, the Prime Minister, have spoken extensively about the need to vaccinate ourselves, especially in this particular season. We don't want to be caught in a situation where we are visited by double virus, one of the influenza and of course COVID. We are contemplating having yet another flu experience, vaccination experience. So I do kindly just invite our members of South Beach to please take advantage of this. I accept and understand that there are some negative profiles being attached to this issue of vaccination in the public domain. The sensible-minded persons of our community should be aware that vaccination is a reality of the medical firmament in which we abide, and that it is a necessity, particularly of persons who may find themselves to be vulnerable, Mr. Speaker, particularly those with certain levels of comorbidity. I also wish to beg the indulgence of members of New Providence, members of New Providence, to spread the word that there is now available in the primary and preschools of New Providence, primary and preschools of New Providence, tablets for all students. And persons who are interested, kindly please avail themselves, meaning the parents of those students, presenting a government-issued ID to that particular school so that they can grab a device, Mr. Speaker. Now, I do understand, sir, that in some situations, there are persons who are now caring for their grandchildren or other relatives because of certain circumstances. I get that, understand that. Please contact the Ministry of Education because the schools are only going to give it to the parent who is registered for that child in that particular school. So I do kindly ask for all members of New Providence to please advise their constituents that these tablets are available for the preschool and the primary school. So we're working assiduously with our corporate partners and others to assist those in the junior high and the senior high. And when they become available, certainly the member here will be advising the public and the House of Assembly. So I kindly ask for that. And then there's any concern whatsoever, members know how to reach me, any whatsoever, please, I do wish for them to advise me wherever that concern may be so that I could assist. We have the circumstance in the moment, Mr. Speaker, where about 25 to 30% of our students are not in school. This is quite troubling. It's really a bit of difficulty and some concern. And they are not in school because either they don't have a device or they don't have the internet capability. We're working really hard to do this. And I'm grateful to Alive, I'm grateful to Cape Bahamas, grateful to BTC. We are working, I'm grateful to Cisco, who is making internet capability available in 12 very challenged neighborhoods of our community. But I do wish for all of our members to please advise me wherever there may be a challenge. I am advised, I thought that we already had this matter settled in the Family Islands, only to now learn that it is not quite settled in the Family Islands. That's quite disturbing to me. I want to know where that situation is in any Family Islands, but particularly New Providence and Abacosa, so that we could get these students back to school. And as you would know, Mr. Speaker, we are working assiduously and aggressively to get students back to school face to face. Because the reality is that most of our students learn best in that environment. And I may be able to make an announcement quite soon as to when that will be rolled out here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise always on behalf of the good and wonderful and resilient people of the great constituency of Fox Hill. At this point, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to speak to the passing of Mr. James Ingram of South Central Eleuthera. I didn't know him personally, But who I did know was his sister, Miss Annie Ingram Mingo. She was my primary school teacher in Foxdale at Sandlands Primary School. She lived in Foxdale, right opposite Sandlands Primary School. And it's interesting, she lived there, she was the teacher, and her daughter followed in her footsteps and was the teacher at Sandlands Primary School. So that family has made quite an impact on Foxdale. His niece, Mrs. Amelie, who is currently the principal at Uriah McD, sent me chapter 11 of his book. And it talks about how he didn't enter frontline politics until he was 64 years old. So for those of you out there who want to make a contribution to your country, James Oswald Ingram took that step at age 64. So if you have a contribution you want to make to your country, then there's still time. Michelle Obama said, service is the rent we pay for living. And James Oswald Ingram was that example of service as his rent for living. Another interesting thing about him that brings us together is this. He talked about being astonished when he was named Speaker, when he was first elected to the House. I was astonished when I was named Whip, but anyway, he was astonished, and so was his wife. But what was really good, he said, what was really good, and which showed partisanship, bipartisanship, and that's what we need to do, more bipartisanship. He was nominated, and his nomination for Speaker was seconded by none other than Alvin Smith, who was then the opposition. Homeboy. And so if they can do it, can't we do it? Okay.
Mhm.
So may his soul rest in peace. And as the member for South and Central Andrew said, I can't say it as eloquently, may he rise in glory. Condolences to the family of Mrs. Esther Dorset, who is, unlike South and Central Andrews, I'm now going into member statement, my last 40 seconds. And so, condolences to the family of Mrs. Esther Dorset. She was a great supporter. I spent many hours on her porch, which was really shady and a nice place to rest and catch the breeze. To her son, Paul Dorset, and her daughters, Marion Edgecombe, who is a daughter-in-law to the former and late Frank Edgecombe, my cousin, and her other daughter, who was just recently moved into Foxdale, Michelle Rowe. And finally, I'd like to extend condolences. And this is really, really, death is always hard on the family. It's hard on friends and my well-behaved colleagues. The family of Mrs. Lillian Smith Massey. This is hard because just in September, her husband died. And now she has also gone on to glory. This is a tough time. This is COVID. And no, she didn't die of COVID as far as I know, but I'm saying there's so much stress. There's so much hardship. There's so much uncertainty, but this is something we can get through together. This is where bipartisanship comes in. We can do this as a country. We can do this as colleagues, and we definitely can do it as Bahamians. So heartfelt condolences to her children, her daughters, Erica Brown and Tysina Taylor, and her sons, Glenn Edwards and Anton McPhee. And I want to end with this, Mr. Speaker. I want to say a happy birthday to the mayor of Foxdale. Reverend J. Carl Ramming celebrated his birthday on Monday. Oh, he's 25 years young. And also to Mrs. Rosemary Burrows And to them, I want to say, happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Now, you know, I'm not going to win any medals for singing, but I love you. God bless you.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for North Eleuthera. He beat you to the punch.
I'm quite certain the speaker is aware that I could only be getting up to speak on behalf of the former speaker of this house. First, let me say, the member for Central South Eleuthera, the Honorable Hank Johnson, would have been here to personally convey condolences on behalf of the Honorable Oswald Ingram. However, he and his family at this time is making preparations to lay his mother-in-law to rest tomorrow. Having said that, I'm sure he shares in the very sentiments that I do in reference to Mr. Oswald Ingram. I think the member for Central South Andres most certainly encapsulated who Mr. Oswald J. Ingram was. He was most certainly a statesman and a man who made all of Eleuthera proud. Commentary from the member from Angliston also enunciates the type of individual he was. You know, in this house sometimes we get heated and we get out of character. And there are those who may feel that it's always us against them and a constant fight and battle. But Mr. Ingram was a man who we could take pattern after because he was a humble man, came from humble beginnings, but was able to make his mark in the island of Eleuthera. And he's left a legacy for all of us from Eleuthera to try and follow in those footsteps. I had an opportunity to speak to two of his sons who happened to be very close friends of mine, Wayne and Terry. And I know the loss for them is great, but Mr. Ingram had been suffering for quite some time. But I know they find joy in the precious memories that they have enjoyed during that period in which he meant so much to them and the experiences that they shared. And so I say to our man of the soil, a freedom man, a man from the Isle of Freedom, may God bless you and continue to allow you to sleep in his bosom. Now, I just want to say briefly that some of the concerns that are in the constituency of North Eleuthera, and they're primarily the conditions of our government buildings, some of our roads in Harbor Island, and I've spoken with the member for Kalani, and he's indicated he will be visiting us very soon shortly. And hopefully after that visit, those matters will be rectified. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't note that the member had sat because I was reading, Mr. Speaker, a line from the former Speaker Ingram's book, and it's interesting. And he says, as he speaks to his life, interestingly, he spoke in 2 chapters on the first and the second term, and in the second paragraph of the chapter 11, he says, I ran 2 times before I won, and I won on the 3rd go around. That's how silly I was. Mr. Speaker. But I want to commend, Mr. Speaker, this book to all of us in this house. And surely, Mr. Speaker, the copy that I purchased this morning, I'm going to put it in the Tall Pines Community Center and Constituency Office for all of our young persons to read and learn of this very, very important gentlemen in our country. Mr. Speaker, as the presiding officer of this House, with yourself, I just want to, on behalf of the people of Tall Pines, and I think I speak, as my colleagues have said, on behalf of all the Bahamian people, to say that we cherish the former Speaker and his work that he has done, and particularly the work he has done in the great island of Eleuthera. The Speaker, I just wish to advise my constituents in Tall Pines as I met them this morning in High Tree. As I mentioned last week, Mr. Speaker, we did a Thanksgiving food breakfast for our residents on Monday in Straughns Hill. We did the same thing in Victoria Gardens yesterday, and I thank my colleague, the members for North Andros and the Berry Islands, and the member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini for joining me yesterday in Victoria Gardens early in the morning, Mr. Speaker, 7 o'clock. And today, this morning, Mr. Speaker, we were in High Tree Estate with our residents there. And I promised them, Mr. Speaker, that I would speak to the honorable member for Carmichael with regard to some of their... I did mention it last week, that we would talk about some of the concerns they had. So I want to say to them, I wouldn't know those concerns, but I've spoken to the member for Carmichael and Minister of Works with regards to the issues in High Tree and with regards to the issues in Alga Gardens or Alga Estates. And so I want to let them know that we are addressing those issues. Speaker, finally, I just want to, I thank the member for South Beach for his words with respect to the devices, that we have purchased devices in the Tall Pines constituency and we should have taken delivery of them, the rest of them today, and advise them that the constituency office is open for them to retrieve the ones that we have, and to remind them of the words of the Minister of Education that they will be available through other means. I just want to caution them, Mr. Speaker, as I sit, that we are adhering to the advice given by the Minister and member for South Beach, that we want to get the information as we give them those devices, so that we won't be duplicating this very important service in our community. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank the people of Tall Pines again and the persons who helped during these 3 days of our Thanksgiving ceremony, our Thanksgiving events. Thank them for their service and wish Tall Pines and wish all of my colleagues and the rest of the Bahamas a very good Thanksgiving. And I look forward to continually serving in this honorable house as our former Speaker, the Honorable James O. Ingram, has done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable members, just before we proceed with member statement, I just want to bring to the attention of all members that I've just received notice of a philanthropic gesture, in that we have someone who is volunteering to purchase a copy of the book by James Oswald Ingram for each member of Parliament. And those copies will be distributed to each member on the final day before we break for Christmas. So that'll be a Christmas present to all of you, including myself. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pine Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought it would be robbery being from the northern part of the Bahamas and not having the opportunity to speak of our dearly beloved departed brother in the person of Mr. we were affectionately known him as Mr. Oswald Ingram. The honorable member, I've known him for some time, not only within the political organization of the Progressive Liberal Party, but I also know him as a lay preacher and a businessman, particularly in Rocksound, Eleuthera. During many of my days of doing early missionary work on the island of Eleuthera, he would have been in a few of my meetings, and I'm grateful for his life. And I think that the people of Eleuthera are indeed proud of a man who has come from humble beginning. The Honorable Oswald Ingram was a nationalist and a patriot from the island of freedom, gives hope and inspiration to many Eleutherans. by watching his life and watching all that he's accomplished, the area of entrepreneurship, church, and indeed country. He is elevated to high offices within this country, both in the chair where you now sit, Mr. Speaker, but also as Deputy Governor General here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And then, of course, he is able to write a book. So not only can we reminisce about his legacy, but we can also read about it. And that's something, I guess, that we all, perhaps before we move from time into eternity, as our brother did, will have to consider. That perhaps we need to write a memoir, because so many people want to be able to look back and share your experience of politics. Mr. Ingram, and I heard, as Foxell was saying, Mr. Ingram, though he was a member of the Progressive Liberal Party, he was also bipartisan, and he served with distinction and with finish. He was a humble man, a very quiet man. He walked very softly, but he spoke very loudly with his action and his demeanor. It is my prayer that I would, first of all, give my sympathy, condolences, and bereavement to his widow, his wife, his children, and in-laws and grandchildren. It is my prayer that God would grant to him, as they would say in the Anglican Church, grant unto him rest eternal, O Lord, and may his perpetual light shine upon him. God bless him and all the souls of the dearly departed.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Yamacraw.
I take advantage of this opportunity. Yesterday when I spoke about the intended town hall meeting in the Yamacraw constituency, dubbed Yamacraw United as a result of some unrest, some shootings that occurred in the area. Spoken, as I said, to the mothers who are in support, who lost their sons. Children lost their fathers, brothers lost their brothers. As a result, I committed to that community to speak directly to it, and if that I found out any information, that I would tell my good friends in the Royal Bahamas Police Force. I've reached out to some outstanding members in the Yamacraw community and in the Royal Bahamas Police Force. So I'm delighted to say on this Friday, we're going to have a meeting central where those incidents occurred, the last one being on last Sunday. And so Assistant Commissioner responsible for crime, Mr. Solomon Cash, will be there to speak on the panel. Dr. David Allen, Reverend Dwight Ferguson, Mr. Kendall Lewis, and Ms. Brianne Hepburn. It's very serious, Mr. Speaker. Persons have reasons to express concerns for their welfare and safety. And it's unacceptable as we speak about the eradication of all forms of violence against women and children. It's important that women and children feel comfortable to walk around in their community. And so a few degenerates who do not want to live among us can live away from us in some other place, whether it be in the correctional facility or one of the real estate that we have around this country. And so on this coming Friday, we will have a town meeting and addressing this upfront, shedding light on it and saying to these individuals that enough is enough. We are one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Carmichael.
Speaker, let me join my colleagues in thanking the Honorable Minister of Education for ensuring that our young children are going to be able to have the tools that they need for their education. That is an outstanding example of him not only carrying his portfolio duties out, but caring very deeply about our children. I just want to say, Mr. Speaker, that I'm starting my Family Island travels again South Andrews. And on Friday morning, sir, I intend to be in the heart of the city of Black Point. So we'll go down to Black Point on Friday morning, right in the city. From Black Point, we will be going downtown in Barrytarry. The Prime Minister will be in Barrytarry. The Member of Parliament for Exuma will be there. And the member for Garden Hills will be there. All of us will be downtown. And look, in Black Point, we're going to be looking at the roadworks, the status of them, where they are, where they're going. In Barrytarry, we're going to commission the opening of the docks, the dock works, and we finish there. And when we finish that, we're going to be looking at the new asphalt plant in Exuma. Mr. Speaker, the government is investing some $8 million in roadworks in Exuma. And these are not going to be sandfield roads. They're going to be asphalt roads. And so there is a full plant that is being constructed there now. And we're looking forward to being down in Exuma with the Member of Parliament, with the Prime Minister, and with the Member for Garden Hills. And I will continue to update this Parliament as we continue to travel through the Bahamas. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable members, there being no further member statement, I just wish to thank the Minister of Education, the Honorable Member for South Beach, for making available tablets to the preschool and the primary schools. For the residents of Nassau Village, I want to reiterate the remarks by the Honorable Minister that these tablets are available at the schools where your children attend, and that you need to take a government ID to those schools on behalf of your children to gain access to the tablet for your child or children. I have a voice note from the Honorable Minister that I intend to send out to all constituents so that there be no confusion or question about the distribution of these tablets. Now, on Saturday, in collaboration with the Zonta Club of the Bahamas, who has adopted Nassau Village for its 16 days of activism, the Zonta Club will be launching a motorcade throughout New Providence that will end in Nassau Village at approximately 1 p.m. It will, thereafter, we'll host a Thanksgiving meals. We'll give out 500 meals. This is not a part of the government distribution. This will be 500 meals distributed from the Nassau Village Community Center by the Member of Parliament for Nassau Village. And I want to remind persons that you must come in. It's a stop and go exercise in this COVID environment. You must come in person to collect your meal. The menu is good. We have fish, chicken, and ribs. and those persons who are unable to come, we'll virtually send you a picture of the meal, but we will not be issuing more than one meal per person. So you need to come in person. Thank you very much. Appointments of select committees. Instructions to select committees. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Mango Key, South and Central Andros.
Mr. Speaker, before I simply allude to notices, I would like to publicly also join the other members who would have commended the member for Carmichael ensuring political maturity in this honorable place, inviting the member for the Exumas to join him. He's done the same with me. Hopefully one day you'll be able to travel with me to Deep South Andros and Mango Key. Mr. Speaker, quickly, all notices remain. All notices in the name of the loyal opposition remain. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, all notices in the name of the government is now renewed. And I will move that the business of the House will suspend until tomorrow at 3 p.m. But before that time,
Adjourn.
the Prime Minister, adjourn. The Prime Minister but Mr. Speaker, I will move, before I move the adjournment, I move and serve notice that the following resolution will be debated at 3 p.m. tomorrow. Whereas pursuant to Article 29(1) of the Constitution, the Governor General may make a proclamation of emergency declaring that a state of public emergency for the purpose of the article exists in the Bahamas. And whereas on the 17th day of March 2020, a proclamation of emergency was made by the Governor General declaring that a state of public emergency exists in the Bahamas, and this proclamation expired on the 29th day of June 2020. And whereas on the 29th day of June 2020, a second proclamation of emergency was made by the Governor General declaring that a state of public emergency exists in the Bahamas, and this proclamation was due to expire on the 29th day of December 2020. And whereas pursuant to Article 29(4) of the Constitution, another proclamation of emergency may be made before the expiration of a proclamation of emergency extend under Article 29(5). And whereas pursuant to Article 29(4) of the Constitution, the Governor General made a proclamation of emergency. Herein, the proclamation dated the 24th day of November 2020, declaring that a state of public emergency exists in the Bahamas. And whereas pursuant to Article 29(4) of the Constitution, the proclamation ceases to be in force at the expiration of a period, 14 days beginning on the day on which it was made, or such longer period as may be approved under paragraph 5 of Article 29 of the Constitution. And whereas Article 29(5) of the Constitution provides for the continuance in force of a proclamation if at any time while the proclamation is in force, a resolution is passed by each House of Parliament approving its continuance in force for a further period not exceeding 6 months, beginning on the date on which it would otherwise expire. The proclamation shall, if not sooner revoked, continue in force for that further period. And whereas pursuant to Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, Chapter 34, here and after the Act, the Governor General made the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 on the 24th day of November 2020. And whereas Section 3(3) of the Act provides that emergency regulations may empower such authorities or persons as may be specified in the regulations to make such order, and rules for any of the purposes for which such regulations are authorized by the Act be made, and may contain such incident and supplementary provisions as appears to the Governor General to be necessary for or expedient for the purpose of the regulations. And whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 empower the competent authority to make such orders. And whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020 was made by the competent authority on the 24th day of November 2020. And whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020 was made by the competent authority on the 24th day of November 2020. And whereas having regard to the continuing proliferation of confirmed cases in the neighboring jurisdiction and active cases in the Bahamas, and whereas the state of public emergency in the Bahamas continues, and whereas it continues to be necessary and expedient for securing the public safety and defense of the Bahamas, the maintenance of public order, the suppression of mutiny, rebellion, and riot, and for maintaining supplies and services essential to life and well-being of the community to continue in force, the proclamation, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020, and the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House, A, approves the continuance of the proclamations of the emergency made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021. B, affirms the continuance and effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020, made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021. And C, affirms the continuance and effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020, made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021. And D, affirms the continuance of effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020, made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021.
Order that the resolution be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Honorable Member for Balmotown.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the business of this House do adjourn until tomorrow, the 26th day of November at 3 p.m.
At 3 p.m.?
At 3 p.m.
At 3 p.m. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House adjourns to Thursday, the 26th of November at 3 p.m. As many members are in favor, will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Final adjournment.
There's a message to members that we desire not to stay long. But I do now move, Mr. Speaker, that the business of this House do now adjourn.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House do adjourn to Thursday, the 26th of November at 3 p.m. As many members as in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The House stands adjourned to Thursday, the 26th of November at 3 p.m.